sign the papers on a Tuesday. My daughter stood beside me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had helped her with her homework for 12 years, and watched me write my name, and she smiled. I did not look at her when I handed the pen back. I looked at the window. The maple in the backyard had just started to turn. It was October, and the light was very thin and golden, the way it gets in Ontario when summer has finally given up. When the buyers came with their certified check 3 weeks later, the notary opened her folder and slid a document across the table. Not to me, to them, and she said, quietly, that there was something they needed to see before we went any further. My daughter's smile disappeared so quickly it was like it had never been there at all. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning because none of this makes sense unless you understand what kind of woman I was before all of this happened, and what kind of woman I had to become. My name is Pauline. I am 69 years old. I spent 31 years teaching grade 4 at the same elementary school in Burlington, Ontario. I retired 6 years ago. My husband, Ray, died 4 years ago in March. A heart attack, sudden, on a Saturday morning while he was shoveling the driveway. The kind of death that doesn't give you time to say anything. One moment he was there and then he was not, and I was standing in the front hall in my house coat holding 2 cups of coffee, and the world had simply rearranged itself without asking my permission. Ray and I had one daughter. Her name is Melissa. She was 37 when all of this happened. She lives in Oakville with her husband, whose name is Darren, and their 2 children. We used to be close, Melissa and I. Or I thought we were. I've spent a lot of time since then reconsidering what close actually means. The house is a semi-detached on a quiet street near the lake. Ray and I bought it in 1989 for $112,000. I know what it is worth now. Everyone in Burlington knows what their house is worth now. That is not a small thing when your daughter starts doing the math out loud at your kitchen table. After Ray died, I managed. That is the word I would use. I managed. I kept the house, I paid the bills, I learned how to deal with the furnace filter and the Evestro and the property tax installments. I have a small teacher's pension, and Ray had a modest RRSP that came to me, and we had paid the mortgage off in 2011, so the house was mine outright. I was not wealthy, but I was not struggling. I had what I needed. What I did not have for a long time was anyone to talk to. Melissa called on Sundays. Usually, while she was driving somewhere, I could hear the children in the back seat and the click of her turn signal, and sometimes Darren's voice in the background saying something I couldn't make out. The calls were 15 minutes, sometimes 10. She always ended them the same way. She would say, "Okay, Mom, I'll let you go," as though she were doing me a kindness by hanging up. I had a neighbor, a woman named Ruth Ann, who had moved in 2 doors down about a year after Ray passed. She was a few years younger than me, recently retired from nursing, and she had a directness about her that I found refreshing. She did not treat me like a problem to be managed. She brought me tomatoes from her garden, and we drank tea on my back porch, and she asked me real questions and waited for the actual answers. It was Ruth Ann who noticed, before I did, that something had shifted in how Melissa spoke to me. It started slowly. Melissa began asking about the house more often. Not about me, about the house. Whether I had had the roof looked at, whether the windows were original, what the heating bill was running. I answered her questions because they seemed reasonable. A daughter looking out for her mother, that is how I read it. Then in January, she came for dinner, just her, without Darren or the kids, which was unusual. She brought a bottle of wine she didn't open and sat across from me at the table and said that she had been thinking, and that she was worried about me. I asked her what she was worried about. She said she was worried about me being alone. She said the house was too big for one person. She said that she had done some research. She said it like that. I've done some research, as though she had prepared a presentation, and that there were some really lovely retirement communities in the area. Active living, she called it. People your own age. Activities. She said the word activities the way you say it to a child. I told her I was not interested in a retirement community. She said she thought I was being stubborn. I said I thought she was being presumptuous. She left without finishing her dinner. I cleared the table and washed the dishes and stood at the sink, looking out at the backyard, and felt something cold and unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not quite fear, something adjacent to it. She called 2 days later and apologized. We did not speak of it again for almost 2 months. It was March when Darren came with her. That was new. Darren was not unpleasant, but he was not warm either. He had a way of looking around a room like he was taking inventory. They sat on the sofa and I sat in the armchair, and Melissa did most of the talking, and Darren nodded at intervals like a second opinion. Melissa said she had been talking to someone, a financial planner, she said, though she did not offer his name. And that given the current real estate market and given my age and given the rising cost of property maintenance, it might make a great deal of sense for me to consider selling the house and using the proceeds to fund a comfortable retirement. She said the phrase, a comfortable retirement, slowly, like she wanted me to hear each word individually. I asked what I was supposed to live in if I sold the house. She said that was exactly what she wanted to talk about. She had toured a place in East Burlington, a continuing care facility, though she did not call it that, she called it a community, and it was very well regarded, and there was a unit available, and the monthly fee was quite reasonable given everything that was included. I asked how much. She told me. I did the math in my head. My pension, after fees, would cover approximately 40% of that monthly amount. I asked where the rest would come from. She said from the proceeds of the house sale. I sat with that for a moment. The room was very quiet. Outside I could hear the Delacroix boy from next door bouncing a basketball in the driveway, the same rhythm over and over. I asked Melissa if she had spoken to a lawyer about any of this. She said she hadn't thought that was necessary. I said I thought it might be. She reached across and put her hand on my knee and said, "Mom, we just want what's best for you." And her voice was so gentle and so reasonable that for a moment I almost let myself believe it. But Darren was looking at the wall behind me. There is a framed photograph there, Ray and I at Peggy's Cove in 2003. Darren was looking at it the way you look at something when you are already thinking about what you will do with it once it's yours. I told them I would think about it. They left, and I sat in the chair for a long time without turning on any lights. I called Ruth Ann that evening. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. And when I was finished, she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, "Pauline, you need to talk to a lawyer. Not because you're in trouble yet, but because you need to know exactly where you stand before anyone else decides that for you." I had not seen a lawyer since Ray and I had drawn up our wills in 2014. We had used a woman named Patricia, though she has since retired, and I called her old office the next morning and was put in touch with a colleague there, a woman who came highly recommended. I will not use her name here because she is a private person and her name is not the point. The point is what she told me. She did not treat me like someone whose time was limited or whose mind was uncertain. She offered me a cup of tea, and she listened, and then she asked me questions, precise ones, and she took notes. And when I finished, she sat back and looked at me and said, clearly and without drama, "Your daughter has no legal authority to make you sell your home, leave your home, or make any decisions about your finances or living arrangements unless you have signed a power of attorney granting her that authority." I said I had not. She said then, "You are in full control of your own affairs." I said I knew that. What I did not know was what to do with it. She said, and this is the part I have thought about many times since. She said that simply refusing was one option, but that it was not my only one, and that depending on what I wanted for the future, there might be a more elegant approach. She explained to me what a family trust was, not the complicated kind you read about in the business section. A straightforward one, designed to hold the property and designate how it would be used and transferred. She explained that once the house was held in trust, the terms of that trust would be legally binding and could not be altered by anyone other than me, the trustee, during my lifetime. She explained the costs, which were real but not prohibitive. She explained the timeline. I sat there in her office on a quiet Thursday afternoon in March with the sleet tapping against the window, and I thought about the maple in my backyard and the kitchen table and Darren's eyes on the photograph of Ray and me at Peggy's Cove. I said, Let's do it. It took 6 weeks. I told no one. Not Melissa, not Darren, not anyone except Ruth Ann, who kept the secret with the same steadiness she brought to everything. During those 6 weeks, Melissa called twice. Both calls were short. She mentioned the Burlington community again. She said the unit wouldn't be available forever. I said I was still thinking. She made a sound I recognized from when she was 12, and I had told her she couldn't go to a sleepover on a school night. Impatient. Contained. I asked her on the second call how Darren was doing. She said fine. Why? I said just asking. She said okay. We said goodbye. I planted my tomatoes in May. I repainted the front door a color called Heritage Red that I had been considering for 3 years and never gotten around to. I had Ruth Ann's nephew come and look at the back fence, which needed 2 new boards. These felt like important things to do, tending to what was mine. The trust was finalized on a Wednesday in late April. My lawyer called to confirm. I thanked her. I made myself a proper dinner, salmon with dill, the good plates, and I sat at the kitchen table alone and ate it slowly and felt, for the first time since Ray died, like the ground under my feet was solid. Melissa arrived on a Sunday in May with Darren and a man she introduced as a real estate agent. She had not called ahead. She had texted the night before to say she was coming by, which I suppose she considered the same thing. The agent's name was Kevin. He was professionally friendly, the way young men in good shoes sometimes are. He shook my hand and smiled and looked around my living room with the trained appreciation of someone who has learned to see square footage first. I made coffee. We sat down. Melissa said that she and Darren had decided that it would be best to move forward with the listing. She said it like that. They had decided, as though the decision were already made and I was simply being informed. I said that was interesting. She said the market was good right now, really good, and Kevin here had pulled the comps and the house would likely sell quickly, maybe over asking, and that she had already looked into accelerating the availability of the unit at the Burlington community, and that everything could move very smoothly if we just got started. I asked Kevin what he thought the house was worth. He told me. I nodded. I looked at the number like it meant something to me in that moment, which it did not. I said, all right. Melissa looked at Darren. I said, I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. She blinked. I think she had prepared for resistance. She had not prepared for agreement. Kevin produced a listing agreement. I read it carefully, which I could see made him slightly uncomfortable. I signed it. I handed it back. Melissa said, Mom, I think you're doing the right thing. I said, I'm sure you do. She did not appear to notice the difference between those two statements. The house sold in 11 days, conditional on financing, then firm. The buyers were a young couple from Mississauga. Nice people. They sent a kind email through their agent. They had a daughter, 18 months old. I wrote back and told them about the maple in the backyard, how it went red in October, how I hoped their daughter would grow up climbing it. The closing was set for a Tuesday in November. My notary, a different professional than my lawyer, but they had worked together and both knew the full picture, had prepared the documentation. We met at her office. The buyers were there with their agent. Melissa was there. Darren was there. The notary's name was Louise. She was a small woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of calm that comes from having seen a great many things and being surprised by very few of them. She went through the standard closing documents. Deed transfer, title insurance, the statement of adjustments, and then she slid a document across the table and said, there is one additional matter we need to address before this transaction can be completed. Melissa looked at the document. She picked it up. She read the title and I watched her face. She said, what is this? Louise said it was a copy of a registered family trust filed with the relevant authorities, which held the property and stipulated the terms of any sale or transfer, including the distribution of proceeds. Darren said, I don't understand. Louise said the trust was straightforward. The property had been held in trust since April. The sale could proceed. However, the net proceeds, after fees and adjustments and the cost of suitable alternative housing for the trustee, which was me, were to be directed in their entirety to a registered charitable foundation of my choosing, to be named within 30 days of closing. I had chosen the Children's Hospital in Hamilton. It seemed right. The room was very quiet. Melissa said, "Mom." I looked at her. I had thought I might feel something sharp in that moment. Anger or triumph or grief. But what I felt was something quieter than any of those. A kind of settled clarity, like when a long noise finally stops. I said, "I know what I'm doing." She said, "You can't do this." I said, "I've done it." Darren said something to his real estate agent low and quick, and the agent looked at his phone. Louise said, gently, that the trust had been in place for 7 months, had been prepared and reviewed by legal counsel, and was fully enforceable. She said the transaction could still close on schedule. The buyers had no reason to be concerned. This was a matter entirely between me and my family, and the law was clear. The buyer's agent looked uncomfortable. The buyers themselves were not there, which I was glad of. I would not have wanted them to see any of this. Melissa said nothing else. She signed where she needed to sign. Darren signed where he needed to sign. I signed where I needed to sign. Louise collected the documents with the same quiet efficiency she had brought to the whole proceeding. In the parking lot after, Melissa stood beside their car and looked at me. She said, "I don't even know who you are right now." I said, "I know. I think that might be the problem." I walked to Ruth Ann's car, where she had been waiting for me the whole time, a thermos of tea on the seat between us, and we drove away. I rented a very nice apartment on the 12th floor of a building near the waterfront in Burlington. The view looks out over the lake. On clear days, you can see the Toronto skyline across the water, small and glittering. I have a proper kitchen and a balcony where I put a folding chair and a small table, and I drink my morning coffee there when the weather allows, which in Ontario is not always, but often enough. I gave most of the furniture to charity. I kept a few things: the photograph from Peggy's Cove, the good plates, a quilt my mother made that had been folded at the end of the bed in the back room for 40 years. I did not take the kitchen table. Melissa has called twice since the closing. Both calls were short. She did not mention the house or the trust or the hospital. We talked about the children. I asked about her daughter's dance class and her son's hockey. She answered. It was careful and a little formal, the way conversations are when something large is sitting in the room that neither person is ready to name. I don't know what will happen with Melissa. I have thought about it a great deal. I love her. That has not changed and will not change, because love is not a reward system. It is simply what it is. But I also understand now that loving someone does not obligate you to arrange your life to suit their expectations of it. That is a lesson I wish I had learned when I was 37. It took me until 69. I went to Newfoundland in September. I had always meant to. Ray had wanted to go, and we had always found a reason not to, and then there was no more Ray, and I found a reason not to, for a different set of reasons. And then one day in August, I was on my balcony with my coffee looking at the lake, and I thought, "Pauline, there is nothing stopping you." I took the ferry from North Sydney. I drove the coast road. I ate cod and walked out on the headlands in the wind with my hair doing whatever it wanted. I was cold and the light was extraordinary, and I cried once, at Cape St. Mary's, looking out at the Atlantic, and it was a good cry, the kind that releases something, not the kind that takes something from you. I thought about Ray. I thought about the maple. I thought about the children in Hamilton, whose families would have a few dollars less to worry about because of what had happened on a Tuesday in November in a notary's office in Burlington, Ontario. I do not know if Melissa will understand any of this. Maybe when she is 69 she will. Maybe she won't. I can't manage that. I can only manage what's mine. The apartment is quiet in the evenings. Ruth Ann comes on Thursdays and we make dinner, and she tells me about her grandchildren, and I tell her about wherever I've been reading about this week, because I am planning another trip to Prince Edward Island this time, in June, when the lupins are out. The lake is very still tonight. The city across the water is lit up, all that light reflected on the water below it, and it is beautiful in a way that I would not have had the time to see if I were still managing a house and a yard and a life arranged around waiting for a phone call that would last 15 minutes. I am not angry. I want to be clear about that, because I know it might be hard to believe. But anger takes a kind of energy I would rather spend elsewhere. On the trip to PEI. On Thursday dinners. On the folding chair on the balcony and the lake in the morning light. The house on a quiet street near the water in Burlington belongs to a young family now. There is a baby who will grow up watching that maple go red every October. I hope she climbs it.